Welcome to Uncle Nene's Nerdcast. I'm your host, Nathan Fletcher, aka Uncle Nene. We have a great show today. We have a real guest with us, an incredible career, a true adventurer. Shannon Malone-deBenedictis is a two-time Emmy-winning documentary filmmaker, a creative executive who's done everything from Shark Week to BBC's Planet Earth, Discovery's Atlas. She's produced acclaimed nature programs for Disney Plus, Netflix, Nat Geo, you name it. The Emmy-winning Secrets of the Whales and Penguin Town. They tell stories that are epic and emotional, and they feel kind of like a great novel or sci-fi saga. So I'm really glad that she's here to talk about her blending of factual storytelling with cinematic wonder. Shannon, welcome to the show.
Thrilled to be here. Thanks a lot. And thanks. What a great introduction. Wow, that was great. Yeah.
It was really exciting to hear that you agreed to do the podcast because one of my daughters, Gabby, is a phenomenal shark enthusiast. She loves sharks, so she was addicted to Shark Week for many years of her life. So when I said I got to tell her, Dad's doing something cool, I'm going to get to talk to the lady that produced Shark Week. So thanks for
Happy to
coming on the
help you out.
show.
That's great. No problem. Any
Yeah,
points. That's good.
yeah. Any cool dad points?
Yeah.
It's rare these days, so it's appreciated. So tell me a little bit about Shark Week, Planet Earth. What was that like for you as a storyteller, and did you realize at the time that you were kind of world building, much like we do in sci-fi and fantasy?
I think that when I first started doing the shark shows, it was when I worked at Discovery Channel in the early 2000s. And I realized that it was part of a bigger phenomenon. I remember seeing the first air jaws and saying, wow, this is going to take off. This is really going to be part of the not just the American psyche, but the world psyche. And that led on a journey of just a lot of shark programs I've done. I think it's over 30, and I think that's actually a really low number in terms of how much I've done. And what I find is that these creatures just hypnotize everybody because similar to sci-fi, similar to fantasy or other genres, you're going into their world. You're immersing yourself into this strange, creepy place where they are the ones who set the rules, not us. And we come, at least in the shows I do and what I believe, we come in peace. We want to learn about them, but it is like approaching a whole alien world and how you do it. So in structuring the stories around this, a lot of my motivation is thinking about what are those feelings? What are those things that we have inside of us that make us both incredibly fascinated by these creatures, but also a little bit scared? I mean, like, okay, some of the places that we dive in around the world, you look at it and you're like, oh no, this looks like, aliens. This looks like,
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
a complete, foreign place. Okay, we need to kind of amplify that. And at the same time, educate people that no, they're actually friendly. We're coming again, we come in peace. They honestly
Right.
don't really care about us unless we're covered in chum. That's how we have to approach it. So that's what I took from doing all those programs.
Thank you. That's great. One thing I did notice is that, a lot of your work, you treat animals almost like characters, and I think that adds, some kind of connection and engagement for the viewer. It increases the stakes for what they're watching. And when you're piecing together, say, something like a Planet Earth, are you consciously building a story arc? Do you go into it with that approach? We're going to have a hero, a villain, protagonist, antagonist. Does it sometimes work out like that?
It does, but we have to be really careful in wildlife filmmaking. Is there's a phrase, we do not anthropomorphize them. We do
Okay.
not put on we don't put human characteristics on animals unless we know scientifically that it is part of their behavior, part of their existence.
Interesting.
So we have to be
Interesting.
really, really careful. But the thing is so there's no like enemies, there's no villains, there's no heroes in there.
Right.
But what we do is in portraying their behaviors, there is this balance of predator and prey. There is survivors, their stories in terms of weather
Yeah.
comes or there's something that happens. And so you're still using those narrative techniques that are throughout every genre and applying them, but in a way of accurately reflecting what's happening in in the wild. So for example, in Secrets of the Whales, one thing that is very interesting about that is, the apex predator of the ocean are orcas by far. They are
Right.
the wolves of the sea. They are just incredibly smart. But if you watch the series, if you want to put those roles on it, we did the first episode all about orcas. Then orcas actually became the predator in the next 3 episodes because they do predate on
Right.
humpbacks, sperm whales, and belugas. And people, we
Yeah.
we showed it in a way that people, if you had kind of looked at it, it's like, no, wait, are orcas the villains or the heroes? It's like, well, there are none. It's just the way that
Right.
the wild is, but the way that we build up the suspense, the way we build up the action, because we know what can happen and what does happen, has those dramatic moments that allow us to kind of, maybe in the back of your head, you're going, wait, are orcas the good guys or are they the bad guys?
Yeah.
Which in storytelling, that's actually kind of the best storytelling.
Yeah.
And,
And for those at home, if you haven't checked out Secrets of the Whales on Disney Plus or Penguin Town on Netflix, I highly recommend it. They're cinematic series with rich emotional narratives. Was there something that drew you to whales and penguins in particular? Did you see their stories, and just like, I've got to pursue those? Is there something that sets them apart, or different from, nature, wildlife things that you've done?
I think with Secrets of the Whales and Penguin Town, those were both opportunistic, where people came to the company I was at, Red Rock Films, and amazing
Okay.
Brian Armstrong and Ali Christos, and said, look, we want to do something with these animals. And so my job is to look and say, are there things on there that are there things that are happening? Are there things that are part of this animal's existence that I
Yeah.
believe have a narrative pull, that can
Okay.
draw people in? And what is going to be that thing? What's going to be something that's going to make people go, wow, I didn't know that. That's incredible. And so that's how you kind of
Oh yeah.
zero in. And I've been approached by other things, and I've started research by other producers, and I've started researching
Yeah.
things and gone, it's not there. It's just
Yeah.
not there. I can't find the narrative to pull. The good part about the African penguins in Simon's Town and the whales is that they do have this kind of rich behavior, and is humans have a natural kind of affinity for them. So it makes it
Yeah.
easier to shape those stories. It's when it gets challenging is when you do a story about like a shrew, which,
Right.
you think like, how could a shrew be appealing? Actually, they have to eat like every hour, and they drink blood. So they're actually vicious little creatures. And so you turn
Wow.
it into a horror film. That's how you
Yeah,
do it. Is you make it into a horror film of like,
absolutely.
what? And these creatures do that. So it's finding what's going to be that thing that connects to you. And it's easy when you have whales, and it's easy when you have sharks or penguins.
Yeah.
Shrews, maybe it's a little bit more challenging, but you find the angle.
And when I read that when you were filming Secrets of the Whales, it took you across to 24 different locations. Did that make you feel like you were almost on a first contact mission, doing all that traveling?
I think that it's with the team that I work with. We looked, and I think we calculated the amount of miles we all had gone. We all had traveled, and we looked at it. And what it really impressed upon us is how vast our planet's oceans are. This is when they talk about that, I think more of the moon has been explored than the ocean bottoms. It's true.
Yeah.
It's true.
Yeah.
It really is almost an unfathomable number,
Right.
amount, quantity. And I've been on places on vacation where people are like, I don't understand. I've been out here. I haven't seen a whale. Why haven't I seen a whale? It's like, do you know how big the ocean is? Do you
Right.
know, they're not just hanging out like, hey, how you
Yeah.
doing, man? So I think it really gave us a perspective of, what our planet is and how much is still left unexplored, and that these creatures really gave us access and looking into, and that was just scraping the surface. We have so much more we can learn about whales, and as the technology gets better and time gets better, we're going to learn about it, and I think we're going to be blown away and really get a better understanding of their world.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
I've read how they are socially, they are much more evolved with us, and I think that, your work really showcased that. With Penguin Town, you follow a colony of African penguins essentially cohabitating with humans in this South African town. What were you intentionally, giving them those story acts like characters, or was it more observing and just letting the drama naturally unfold?
Yeah, no, responsible wildlife filmmakers. Yes, I can count myself myself as that, and my collaborators, we have an idea of what we think we're going to be able to cover. We have storylines and plot lines that we think, because we start with what we know. So we know that they
Right.
come up to the shores, we know they build nests, we know that they mate, we know that there's going to be youngins. And then as we observe, we identify potential storylines of what we can do and what we potentially cover. So I jokingly say you have plan A through plan double Z that
Right.
you have in the back of your
Yeah.
mind. And as you're filming and as you're doing it, you're narrowing and you're building this web, you're building this plot line. And like there was the one chick that was a little sick and they brought it to the rehab center. That was opportunistic. That was, you know what, that's a really good storyline. That is
Right.
one that people will really take advantage, really become a part of. And so that's how you do. It's you start out with an arc, a giant plan. If you think about it, if you're exploring
Mm,
a place and you're like, okay, I'm going to go here, I'm going to go here, I'm going to go here,
yeah.
and then you end up building a story. It's the more you plan, I can't stress this enough because I know it sounds like I'm talking about like a choose your own adventure novel, but the more you plan, right, the less it's going to be like where are you going to meander, because you're going to run into problems where I think in Simon's Town, I think a big storm rolled in and I think that we lost about a week of shooting.
Mm,
I was on a Shark Week shoot where a hurricane
yeah.
came in New Zealand and we had to shut down and couldn't film. Those things happen. And so how you pivot, how you maneuver through that
Mm,
is still part of it. But we never go out there with this idea of like, okay, we're going to go find a penguin and pretend that that penguin's sick, or we're going to do this, we're going to do that.
right.
It's
Right.
it's we have potential scenarios and then we fill it in. And also with the keeping in mind that we're going to stay focused on our North Star. Penguin Town was about, we're profiling the summering of these penguins, and that's always our North Star. Sometimes you'll get on a shoot or you'll get something and things start going wrong and it's like, oh, maybe we're going to start profiling this animal. Nope, stick with your
Hmm.
North Star, stay within
Hmm.
that kind of that focus.
That's great. Imagine it can be a tricky line to walk sometimes when you're all working together, but I think that that's great that you have that kind of North Star and you don't try and manipulate it just for the sake of story and things like that. I really do respect that.
No, and I have colleagues who I have the utmost admiration for them. They are perfectly comfortable to go sleep on an ice floe for 3 weeks with hopes of capturing 90 seconds worth of footage, and they're incredibly happy about it.
Wow.
My Gen X undiagnosed ADHD could never tolerate that. So I admire them. I'm like,
Right.
more kudos to you. They're like, don't you want to go camp on an ice floe? I'm like, no, I have no desire to do that. Bravo, bravo.
Yeah, absolutely. You got to have those. That's great. One thing that stands out about your work is how cinematic it is, and I'm sure you work with some great DPs and cameras and operators that help that. I read in an interview where you said you're drawn to documentaries the same way you're drawn to any film. It says whether you're telling the migration of beluga whales or watching Marvel's Avengers fight Thanos, it's still about a great story that pulls you in emotionally. And I really appreciate that comparison. It's personally, I am one of those guys that will on Sunday during the day just put on Planet Earth and watch
Mhm,
it, even though I've seen it before.
mhm,
It's still one of those things that I enjoy watching. And I think that's because of there is an emotional connection with what you're watching. And so
mhm.
it's a story that, you can connect with. It's not just, nature videos. So can you talk a little bit about your creative process? You touched on it some, but, how you're able to, sketch out those story beats as it progresses. Sounds like that could be really difficult. I'd love to hear you talk a little bit more about that.
Well, I think when a topic comes up or I look at an idea for a documentary, I first look at the overview of what are we trying to accomplish here? What
Okay.
is our goal? And that gets back to gets back to my North Star. And that North Star is going to be largely determined. Oh, and by the way, if anybody's listening from like Australia, South Star for you, North Star. Okay. My
Right.
business partner was an Aussie and he's like South Star. And I'm like, okay, fine, whatever. But anyway, so you find that and what's going to be that kind of path that you're going to go and how is that going to be, how are you going to shape that? But always in the back of my mind is, who's the audience for this?
Mm,
Who am I making this film for? Because, and some artists will argue with me on this, and it's a good debate. It's, I'm not
yeah.
making it for me. I'm not making
Right.
it for me, because if I'm making it for me, then then it's an audience of one, and I want people
Right.
to be moved and feel this. So I think about what is going to be appealing to the audience, what's going to really hook them in. And then part of that also is what makes the documentary unique, and that gets to the overarching hook. So with
Right.
something like Planet Earth or Secrets of the Whales, the hook was, you're seeing imagery you've never seen before. You're seeing
Right.
things that they were able to go and capture things. So it's bringing you to a place and bringing you to an experience that is completely new. So
Mm,
then you shape that story for that audience, knowing that that's going to kind of propel you forward. Also, I also, when it comes to the story, and I've gotten some flack for this, but I still stand by it, is I always think about like the inner 14-year-old inside of you. And I say 14 because 14-year-olds can grasp higher concepts, but they still are like, wow, they're
right.
still blown away by
Yeah.
everything. Oh,
Yeah.
and what is going to blow you away? What's going to be the thing that's going to be like, holy cow, I did not expect that. Even in true crime genres and things, a
Yeah.
reveal in a home makeover show, what's going to be that thing that's going to make you go, did not
Right.
expect that. So I think about that when I'm shaping the story. I think about what are going to be those little moments or the information passed along that's going to hook people in. Here's a really funny example is, I'm working on a series right now, and we're putting in a science scene about poop, right?
Okay.
And see, here's the thing.
Yes.
People are like, "What?" And every time I say it, people start laughing. And they're like,
Yes.
"What?" And it's like, because everybody's fascinated by it. Everybody's
Right.
fascinated. And when you find out that poop, particularly bison poop, helps pollinate the greater Yellowstone ecosystem, it actually is a huge benefit to Yellowstone. That's a
Really?
like, see, that's exactly it. So it's, you
Yeah.
find those little things that draws people out, that
Yeah.
draws people and makes them go, okay, you know what? I'm going to remember that. That's incredible. And maybe the next time I'm in Montana and I see a pile of bison poop, I'm not going to go, I'm going to be like, actually, that's good. That's a good thing. So those are the
Yeah.
elements I look for when I want to tell these types of stories.
Yeah. I think your philosophy on documentary filmmaking is a little bit more like my own, which can be different than other people's, but one is it has to be true. Like you have to tell the truth or it's not a documentary.
Mhm.
And then, two is that there should be a way to communicate with the audience that you're trying to communicate to. So it's like, who am I making this for? That kind of philosophy. I think that is very different than, movie making or narrative storytelling, but where you are writing the screenplay for yourself, pretty much,
Mhm.
making a movie you'd enjoy watching.
Mhm.
So I think that that's great. I was curious. One of the things that I think is interesting is, you know, on back to the episodes of families hunting communication. I'm thinking of
Mhm.
Secrets of the Whales. Did you know the theme of each episode when you were going into it, or was it more like we shot thousands and thousands of hours of footage, now we're going to figure out how to break these up into different episodes?
No, no, before we even took one step on a boat, we had
Really?
we
Okay.
had each episode completely mapped out, and in collaboration with Brian Scarry, the photographer, as well as scientists around the globe, we had a really good understanding of what this series was going to reveal. We knew that from piecing together different research studies and observations. So before we went out, that gets back to what I was talking about, is you start with what you know and you
Right.
plan around that. So before we even started filming, we knew that, the North Star was going to be, they have culture. And the hook was, we're going to show you how they're like us. And we knew that
Right.
orcas had very regional behaviors. Sperm whales had regional dialects and language. Humpback whales had more community focused. And beluga, my favorite, this idea that they come together for like a summer family reunion. As if coming from a
Yeah.
large Irish family, that was just really connected
Yeah.
with me. So we
You're right.
knew, so we knew that
Yes.
focus, we knew where, and so how were we going to build out those elements around those central themes? And
Mhm.
so a lot of the things we captured, we were We were things that we were pretty confident we were going to be able to get. But then, we got lucky. We were lucky when we were able to film the sperm whale nursing her calf. And we got super lucky that we were able to get up close to a humpback whale sleeping, who then decided to play with the cameraman, which is great
Wow.
and also terrifying at the same time.
Yes. Yeah.
And then the same thing being opportunistic is when we heard about the beluga pod adopting the narwhal, we immediately sent cameras up there, tracked that, and went back
Absolutely.
the next summer. So it's a combination of both. It's like I said, you stay in that framework,
Right.
you know what you might be able to capture, you know what's possible,
Yeah.
and then when those opportunities happen, you jump and you go after them.
The flexibility has to be there as well as the planning. Yeah, I like the plan A through plan double D. I think that's hilarious. I
Exactly.
may adapt that. Just so you know, I may steal that.
Absolutely.
You know, I guess, one of the things, that working with animals, following animals, it's not like you can tell an actor, be on your mark, so there's a lot that goes into that. Is there a particular story that you have that comes to mind where, the animals just weren't, cooperating with what you were hoping to capture? And, I'm curious if there's any kind of stories like that you could share with us.
Well, I always find it funny. So I said I've worked on over 100 hours of wildlife filmmaking, and we've had the good, the bad. We've had different things happen. We've had accidents and whatnot, and some remarkable moments. Absolutely remarkable moments. What surprises people to find out is arguably the most difficult animal we had to work with was the house cat. When I worked on Inside
Hmm.
the Mind of a Cat,
Yeah, that actually makes sense. Cats are, yeah, they're
and
cats. They're
they're cats, and people are like, well, no, that should be easy. It's like, well, no, they sleep between 18 to 20 hours a day.
yeah. They do
It's
what
not,
they want
they
when they
do
want.
what they want when they want to do it. They're only, they can be trained. But again, the thing is, when we worked with the professional trainers who had been on America's Got Talent, even then they said, oh, no, you have to wait until they're ready. And when they want, they will stop. They'll stop. They'll just be like,
Right.
yeah, we're done. We're not going to
I'm on a
perform
union
anymore.
break, lady.
Right, exactly. They'll immediately do that. So that surprisingly was one of the more difficult ones because while it wasn't maybe necessarily as dangerous as filming great whites or maybe
Yeah.
as unpredictable as trying to find humpback whales, trying to get cats to do something, even at a cat cafe,
Yeah.
the money click, 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 it's just
Yeah.
changing away,
Wow.
those are the things you don't really think about
Yeah.
is sometimes it's just, these are even your house pet,
Yeah.
it's trying to make sure that you get the behaviors or you're trying to profile it
Yeah.
and when they want to. So,
Yeah. Yeah,
yeah.
we shot. I was doing some production. I've been in production most of my life, and so I was doing some production at a cat cafe in Dallas, and we shot over there, and it was hilarious working with the cats because they just do what they want when
Yep.
they want. There's really no. These are of course not trained cats, but I think it's hilarious that even the trained ones are like, well, I'll do what I want.
I'll do what I want. I have like 15 minutes in me, and then
Yeah,
I'm gonna go do what I want to do. And the trainers were like, "No, that's the way cats are." I
that's
was
just how
like,
they are. Yeah.
"Okay, we'll see what we can do with it. Sure, no problem." So
Oh,
yeah,
that's
that's
great.
probably the funniest thing I just find of sorting through. But a long time ago, early at Red Rock, we did a show called Super Squirrel, and that show, like trying to find a way to make things unique and make things different. What I appreciate about that is we were allowed to have fun. And
Yeah.
so to show how far a flying squirrel flies, we brought them to, I think, the University of Texas football field and put
Okay.
them up on a cherry picker and then let it soar. So you could see against the lines on the football field of exactly how many
Right.
yards the
Yeah.
squirrel could go. And then we erected an obstacle course and had, as you can't really see in my background, but I'm a diehard baseball fan, and we
Okay.
got the play-by-play guys for the Washington Nationals to do
Oh, that's great.
play-by-play on the squirrels maneuvering their way through the obstacle course. So again, it's a way to show the information
Just a
and
bit
do it
outside.
exactly, and look, he's picked himself up, so we again, when you can have fun and have it so people can remember it, those are the moments that really stick with me.
Oh, that's great. That's a great idea. I have some funny, kind of fun questions for you. Is there a fictional animal that comes to mind that has been portrayed in cinema or on TV that you're like, if that creature was real, boy, I would love to do a documentary on it?
Wow, that's a really good question.
It puts you on the spot, I know, but
Does Chewbacca count?
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I guess, yeah, a very
What
sentient,
Chewbacca?
kind of animal, high cognitive functions, but
Yeah,
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 yeah, I think that's great. The profile of Chewbacca, I could
yeah.
see that.
I mean, Chewbacca has always been my favorite character. I'm still mad that he didn't get a medal at the end of the first movie.
Right?
I thought that was a just cheated out of an opportunity. They finally gave him a medal
Yeah.
at the last movie because it was like about damn time, right?
Yeah.
So
I was disappointed in I think the last Disney series was not Ahsoka. I loved Ahsoka. It was Acolyte,
mhm,
because when Acolyte took place, Chewbacca was alive, and I was like, how do you do a whole series, prequel series, in the time that Chewie's alive and not work Chewie into the script somehow?
yeah.
Let's get Chewie in there
Let's get him
somehow.
in.
Come on.
Yeah, 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 yeah. So I'd say Chewie. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So let's do some lightning round questions that will be kind of fun. If you could team up with any sci-fi or fantasy character to co-produce a documentary, who would be your ideal co-producer from sci-fi fantasy? Who gives you good producer vibes? Because that's not an
God,
easy job.
these are tough. Holy cow. Man. Let's see. I'll go with Ripley. Yeah, I'll
Oh
go with
yeah,
Alien. I'll go with Ripley.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Great. Yep.
Yeah.
That's a good
I'll go with
one.
her.
As long as she's in the tank top, that's the important part, I think. Yeah.
Sure.
What's your favorite time travel movie or story? Do you have a time travel movie that you love above them all? Because there's been so many, but does one come to mind that you like?
I have childhood fondness for Time After Time. The Malcolm
Wow.
McDowell movie.
Yeah,
That
absolutely.
one has
It's a
always
deep cut.
kind of stuck with me, and,
Yeah,
because remember back in the old days, there was, like, 6 movies on HBO, and that was one of them. So I
yeah,
think I've seen that numerous and have really, really
right.
fond memories of that.
Yes,
So that yeah, I'll go with that one, Time After Time.
that's good. Yeah, Saturday night movie on HBO was a thing,
Mhm.
that people just don't know. But it was like, okay, there's going to be a new movie that comes out. It's been on video for a while, but it's the first time on TV, but
Yep.
we're going to watch it. Saturday night movie on HBO.
Yep.
Yeah. All right. So you film sharks and whales. Is there one of those, if you had to have a favorite, that you prefer, sharks or whales?
Belugas.
Yeah.
Beluga whales.
Okay. And it's because of the kind of family community aspect that
I love
belugas
the
have?
family community aspect. They have that kind of they've biologically been structured to look like they're smiling when they're not really smiling, but they look
Yeah.
like that. Similar to Australian cattle dogs who look like they're smiling all
Yeah.
the time. And I like the fact that for better or for worse, they're pretty amenable. They're pretty nice. The
Yeah.
Russians try to make one a spy. There's just something about them that I kind of like. Yeah.
That's great. That's great. Okay, so if you could have one superpower during filming, what superpower would help you most in where you're filming in these extreme locations?
When I'm filming in extreme locations,
Yeah, well, as you're doing
probably honestly,
documentaries, which
yeah,
one?
if I'm in the field,
Yeah.
if I was in the field, invisibility, without a doubt. Because
Oh
the whole
yeah.
thing is that's
Absolutely.
it.
Put on the Harry Potter
Yeah.
invisibility cloak and get that camera down there and yeah, that would be
You
great.
want natural behavior. Now, I was gonna say if I was in post, it'd probably be like, mind control like Professor X. Yeah,
Right.
like,
Yeah.
"I need you to do this." That would be if I'm making putting things together in post, then that would be Professor X.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that would be good. Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. All right. So let's pretend aliens land tomorrow and
Mhm.
they ask you to show them one nature documentary to introduce Earth. Which film or series do you hand them that's like, here's the best representation of planet Earth? And you can't go with like Ken Burns' Vietnam War or something. Like it has to be a documentary to introduce them to Earth.
The most recent BBC, it wasn't BBC, excuse me, the most recent Our Planet done by Silverback on Netflix, I think does a
Okay.
really wonderful job of
Yeah.
showing what our planet, the natural world, and the urbanized world is about.
Yeah.
And so I think that would be what I would probably show them. And then maybe on the fictional side right now, Idiocracy. Yeah.
Which has ended up being more of a
More of a
documentary. Yeah, absolutely. It's got
Mhm.
electrolytes. It's got
Yeah.
electrolytes. Yeah, I agree completely. All right, so let's see. I think that was the last fun little question I had. So thank you for participating. I really appreciate you coming on the show. This has been a lot of fun. Is there anything that you're working on right now that, or coming out soon, that you can tell people about that is okay and not going to violate your confidentiality agreement?
I do have a series that's coming out later on in
Okay.
fall, winter on WB Discovery. Can't name it yet, not yet, but if
Right.
it's wildlife, that's probably going to be it. And then
Okay.
I am going to be presenting at Atlanta's
Oh, okay.
Comic Con in July, talking about kind of my experience as a documentary filmmaker, as well as I'm going to be on a panel talking about Young Frankenstein and its impact. And I'm really looking forward to talking about Young Frankenstein.
Wow, that's
Yeah,
great. Man,
yeah,
Young Frankenstein. Well, that's awesome.
yeah.
Okay, well, thank you for coming on the show. I really appreciate it. This has been a lot of fun, and I encourage you to keep doing what you're doing for sure. And for all those at home, I hope you enjoyed the show. Thanks for watching. And as I say in every episode, please, for the love of God, stay nerdy. Thanks for watching.